two players who are titans in their regions. And Orange, surprisingly, as we heard Salo mention and you guys mentioned in the pre-show, this is his first HCT appearance. Despite his success elsewhere in competitive Hearthstone, this is the first time on this big of a stage.
And what a time to be here as well. You know, you first playoff, first championship. Looking to make that a first world championship here for Orange as well, but he has to take on OmegaZero. He's one of the best players in the world, and I would say certainly in the China region. But he's brought a very interesting lineup to this tournament. He's actually the only player playing Druid who is not playing Jade Druid, and he is also the lone Hunter player in the field.
Yeah, it's going to be a tough road for him, but he lives and dies by aggressive decks. He likes that type of feel. So we're about ready to jump into the match, but we had a chance to sit down and talk with these guys about their first matchup. So take a look.
Let's do this! OmegaZero versus Orange!
I think that OmegaZero is the best player in all of China after watching them play a lot this year.
我觉得他这次带的卡组还是
I think Orange's lineup is a little bit counter to mine, so I'll probably have a tough time going up against him.
I built a lineup, very mid-range type lineup. Is geared against aggressive decks, whereas OmegaZero has brought an aggressive lineup. So I think that my lineup stacks up really nicely versus him.
或许我觉得从卡组上
I think Orange's lineup might have some advantage over mine, but I think I can overcome that with skill.
He also brought some decks that we were not expecting, and the matchups have been very interesting to playtest. I think I'll do well, but it will be close.
OmegaZero versus Orange! Let's rock!
And the players definitely set the story for this matchup. Orange bringing a mid-range lineup that is targeting aggressive decks slightly, with Galaka Crawlers, with Tar Creepers in his Rogue, Doomsayers in his Druid. So it's definitely going to be an uphill climb for OmegaZero. But he said in the past, he said to us this tournament, that he loves to play aggressive decks, and that's where he feels at home.
Yes, and in the Bahamas, that didn't really reflect his performance, I don't think. He mentioned how he wasn't feeling well while he was out there. It is a very long travel, and that event, I don't think OmegaZero performed his best, but when you see this guy at his best, you understand exactly how he makes it to this stage time and again. Not only is he a great deck builder when it comes to those aggressive decks, but when he's on top of his game, he's on top of the game.
Now, this matchup, not necessarily one of the faster ones. Jade Druid versus the Highlander Priest from OmegaZero. Even though he's bringing an aggressive lineup, Highlander Priest just has such good matchups against the field. It's such a powerful deck that you can't really afford not to put it in your lineup, as every player has put it in here so far in this tournament.
Yeah, I do want to highlight a couple of cards from their deck list as well. Priest has pretty much been tech to the brim at this point, and there's very few slots to play with. But OmegaZero has chosen to do just that. He does not run the Akanai Soul Priest or the Circle of Healing synergies that are here. He is not going with Binding Heal, which is the lower cost option. Instead, he's gone with a copy of Cabal Song Stealer, Greater Healing Potion, and even Cabal Talon Priest and a Dirty Rat to try to combat matchups like Priest or maybe even Quest Mage if that had shown up.
Yeah, it's quite a minion-heavy version of the deck, and you know, Dirty Rat, because of a lot of players expecting Quest Mage. I think when we talked to OmegaZero earlier on this week prior to the tournament, he said he expected a lot of Quest Mage to try and counter the Druid and Priest strategy, and that's why he did bring an aggressive lineup, and that's why he is teching even his non-aggressive lineups to beat those decks. And again, that's also why he feels like he's at a disadvantage in this series, because Orange has brought a lineup that does pretty well. Now, OmegaZero does have some bonuses. He's getting the board early on. You can play this matchup very aggressively, and it is wise to just start putting minions on the board and hit your opponent in the face. He can even curve into Cabal Song Stealer, which he's not really going to have much to silence, I don't think. But just a 5/5, that's what he needs.
Well, he's going to have a Fandral to silence is really the big one here. Orange chose to delay his Wrath so that he could couple it with his Fandral. That Fandral did change the way his turn operated last turn. So Cabal Talon Priest isn't a punish to this Fandral necessarily, but it does leave OmegaZero with a larger minion on board. He gets to go right into the Cabal Song Stealer, and that extra damage is something that's very important to OmegaZero. Having the Druid low so that you can actually deliver a killing blow when Shadow Reaper Anduin arrives, I've found to be one of the higher chances to actually win this matchup for Priest versus Druid.
And we can talk a moment about the pickup from the Curious Glimmer route, which was the Ultimate Infestation.
Oh yeah.
A great card, but a lot of times Priest struggles with hand size later on in the game. Ultimate Infestation may not be a useful card unless OmegaZero's, one, able to get rid of some cards in his hand prior to that turn, or two, he already has the key pieces that he needs to already win the game. Speaking of Raza, Shadow Reaper Anduin, Velen, that kind of stuff. So definitely a good pickup, but it could be tough to use as this game progresses.
I mean, Druid really displays the power of that card because of its ramp. Without ramp, that card would not be anywhere close to what it is right now, nor would just most Druid decks in general. They tend to struggle to aggressive decks because they often spend their early turns ramping, and if you're playing against aggressive deck and you're not spending your early turns ramping, that issue's compounded. Now, OmegaZero's deck isn't that aggressive. It's much more about those late game synergies that come into effect. I think fighting the fight on board is really going to be the determining factor here. I think it's going to be much less about hand size control and having all the super powerful late game tools. If Orange ever gets out to a substantial lead, it's going to about wrap things up.
Yeah, already at 10 mana going into next turn, so Ultimate Infestation is an option. Can go for a refill. One thing that we do have to note is Jade's not big right now.
Yeah.
So you do need time as the Druid. You not only have to fight for the board early, but then you have to get to a point where you go through the phases. You get up to that 10 mana, you draw the cards, and then you build up your Jades. And it's not until that point that you actually start being, the aggressor in the matchup.
Yeah.
And if OmegaZero is able to pick up the key cards that he needs before that point, then Orange could be in trouble, but he's got to get there right now.
OmegaZero trades into...
I don't know about that.
I don't like that at all. OmegaZero is very much the aggressor in this matchup. That 5 damage pointed at Orange's face is a big difference. Now, the thing he's accounting for here is quite exactly Ultimate Infestation, and job well done if that's really the case, but that extra damage could mean a lot as this game rolls on, but maybe this ensures him a couple extra draws out of his Acolyte down the road. But I think this is such a big swing from the Ultimate Infestation that 5 extra damage could be a big difference later down the road.
It all depends on the read. If he thinks that Orange has Ultimate Infestation, he makes the trade. If he has some read that Orange does not have Ultimate Infestation, he goes face every time. And he saw that there's a card in the far left that hasn't been being played. The ramp's been sort of coming off the top, so he's like, well, he probably
very
has
likely.
It. So I'm going to go ahead and trade. So you do want to be sort of the aggressor early on because that damage does stick as we get going. But definitely something to keep in mind as to how this matchup actually works and how the reading actually works.
And the shuffle here from Orange pays great heed to the fact that Acolyte is on board. He knows that if OmegaZero is able to just continuously draw cards, that could spell trouble for him. He's so far ahead where card advantage is concerned that he should be spending a lot less time focusing on that specific issue in terms of like the Jade development and much more on keeping OmegaZero at bay.
Dirty Rat, I guess, not really getting too much better. Pulling out the Jade Behemoth, while it does put the 3/6 on board, it slightly hinders the ability for Orange to develop his Jades. He actually hasn't played Jade card yet, I don't believe. So his Jades are still very small, and he still needs a ton of time. And he's actually going to hide this Doomsayer behind the Dirty Rat to try and get a free turn next turn to do whatever he pleases. But he doesn't really have any plays. Unless he picks up like exactly Anduin or Raza, he's not really doing much next turn except for maybe trying to sift through his deck with Shadow Vision.
Yeah,
but he doesn't really know what he wants at this stage.
I would say at this stage that there are still quite a few draws in OmegaZero's decks that are fairly good. I think Prophet Velen is also just finalist board. Just a 7/7 will help contest. Of course, Raza, strong draw. Lyra, the Sun Shard, is really the standout one to me, though, next to Anduin, of course. I think with a Lyra draw, he could be finding himself in a very strong position right now.
Yeah, it's an interesting choice. Lyra is a card that is starting to fall out of Priest decks in tournament play. Orange is a player, as well as Purple that we saw in the last game, have opted to go away from the Lyra and actually go towards Gadgets and Auctioneer.
Look at this. Orange is accounting for hand size here if he chooses to play this Doomsayer. And this tells OmegaZero there is probably Nourish or second Ultimate Infestation in hand right now. And that's a shuffle on those Jade Idols. There are now 6 Jade Idols in Orange's deck, and he's got an Ultimate Infestation.
I mean, his plan here is a dead giveaway. He threw 4 minions, or 3 minions, plus a Jade Idol shuffle into a Doomsayer board. OmegaZero, the only thing he can have on his mind right now is second Ultimate Infestation.
And that hurts to play Raza into.
Yeah.
But
I mean, that really hurts to play Raza into. There actually is an argument to maybe wait a turn. Maybe let him Ultimate Infestation in your face and then play Raza afterwards. But to be honest, it really doesn't matter. Whether it's 5 damage on the board or 5 damage from hand, it's still 5 damage and his Raza's still going to get removed.
well, Kazakus gets drawn. So this is an important turn for OmegaZero. He needs to find Anduin, and he needs to find it right away.
So he gets to draw 2 cards options, which would look appealing, but he has Ultimate Infestation in his hand, which is almost certainly coming down next turn. So maybe it's summoned 2 friendly minions that have died this game, because he's had actually 2 5/5s that have died this game, a 3/3 and a 3/4.
I mean, it could be the Transform in some case, too. I don't think it's the best option. I'd like to see him dig for Anduin right away, because if he lands Anduin next turn, he gets the big payoff from it. But he is going for Summon on the first one and then the Polymorph. So this board presence helps him contest as well. This is very similar, I think, to drawing cards because he has that Ultimate Infestation, so that's a good spot.
Yeah, it's still tough. He would have liked to see the 5/5s there. This is a little bit lower than average. He's had like Doomsayer die this game, which would have been absolutely terrible. He's had Dirty Rat die. He's had Acolyte of Pain die.
Mind you, if it's Doomsayer, he gets to roll into a clean.
Oh yeah, Doomsayer actually would have been pretty good.
I think all of his reses were actually strong there, and that was something I wasn't thinking about right off the bat.
Except maybe Acolyte of Pain, but
I'll take my draws.
I'll take my draws. Maybe you don't have to use Ultimate Infestation. Maybe get enough draws onto Acolyte to not have to use it.
If I get to draw 5, but I have to burn 1, I'm going to draw 5 cards.
Unless that one is Anduin.
Yeah, well, you got me. And Orange taking it a little bit slower here, choosing to get the Primordial Drake down.
This lines up quite nicely to the Ultimate Infestation. I don't think Orange could have predicted that outcome. I don't think OmegaZero played in a way that would indicate that Ultimate Infestation was in the hand.
Well, this... Is there no Anduin? Oh my gosh. OmegaZero has 10 cards left in his deck, and Anduin and Velen are both down there.
This is definitely the time that Orange needs, and I think this is the time where he's going to start to piece together some of these big Jades. He's got 4 Jade Idols in hand.
Well, the Jades still are fairly small, though. If he plays Aya, he plays a couple Jade Idols. There's still Dragonfire Potion.
Has he played even 1 yet? I don't think so.
No, he hasn't.
It's a 1/1. That Jade is a 1/1.
Orange is going to favor the Jade Idols instead of the Eye of Blackpaw, and the reason for that is because the Jades are so small.
Yeah, but do keep in mind, Orange has used double Ultimate Infestation and a Nourish.
Oh my, TJ.
And OmegaZero picks up Shadow Reaper Anduin, so Orange doesn't really have a way to shuffle Jade Idols back into his deck and draw them again unless he picks up exactly Nourish, because all of his card draw is gone beyond that. So OmegaZero could stabilize with Dragonfire Potion this turn. When Orange reloads next turn with more Jades, they're all going to be above 5/5. So then he plays Shadow Reaper Anduin and can start that chain of spells in order to start piecing together the damage he needs to kill Orange. So Orange kind of needs a Nourish at this point. He's got 3 Jade cards left in his hand, all which die to Shadow Reaper Anduin, but OmegaZero is going to go for it now.
I think this is another really interesting spot. I mean, OmegaZero could have powered shielded his own 5/5, and then Dragonfire Potion cleared the board, attacked Orange for 5, and then followed up with Shadow Reaper Anduin. Instead, he trades off his 5/5 and is starting to shoot the board down in this spot. I think he ends up in a very similar position this way.
Yeah. But he can piece together the damage. He still gets the full board clear, but now Orange has a little bit of a window to piece together Jades, and Orange, a player that prides himself in hard work and preparation. before events. Take a look at what he said about that work leading up to this championship.
Most of the success I've had doesn't really come from how good I am in game. I think that my play is above average, but it's definitely not as strong as some of the other top players in the world. But I think that the most of my success comes from that I'm very efficient in testing.
No question about that.
No, there's no question. He told us that he practiced like 12 hours a day for almost 2 weeks with Purple leading up to this event. And you can see their similar lists. And man, this is going to be a tough board. And I wonder if OmegaZero should have held on to that Shadow Reaper Anduin for one more turn.
This is what I was fearing for, is that he ends up in a similar position in terms of the current board state, but now, if he wants to start clearing off the board and keep pressure around, that means that damage from Shadow Reaper Anduin is sunk into minions instead of into Orange. And similar to the early game, where OmegaZero just simply needed time to get past this, now Orange just needs time, because if he can force OmegaZero to have to clear turn after turn after turn, eventually he's out of resources.
Yeah, it still works out pretty similarly in this regard. I just feel like he could have pushed more damage if he went with the other line, but he still clears the board. Orange is still in a rough position where his deck is nearly out of card draw. And he still has a couple JLs left, so his average draw is not that great. He needs a Nourish to be able to find the resources in order to get the Jades necessary.
And you hit the nail on the head. His average draw is not that good. That is a big point where Orange is going to struggle in this game. Can he reload enough to keep that pressure on OmegaZero?
Well, I want to clarify. His average draw is not that good for a Jade Druid. A 1-mana 8/8 is a pretty good average draw.
Sure, but he's got 10 mana, and, and the rest of his hand is fairly dead. So
if you're playing any other class and you pick up 1-mana 8/8, all right.
Orange is in trouble. He's in a lot of trouble. That Velen unlocks so much potential for OmegaZero.
He's still missing like something to remove. I don't think we're going to be seeing Prophet Velen this turn, but Prophet Velen, like you said, it unlocks the damage. And all of a sudden now, if he picks up that damage that he has in his deck, then
I mean, look at this.
He can end the game. And Orange has not picked up Malfurion.
I mean, just look at what's happening here. Orange is going to lose his whole board.
And OmegaZero is going to draw a bunch of cards.
The shadows grow short.
And Eternal Servitude. There was actually at the very beginning of the set the deck before the Velen deck came out that was an OTK priest deck with Malagos and Eternal Servitude that you would go for. But he's got a ton of damage.
He's got 28 from hand next turn. Orange is dead.
Well, he can Malfurion into taunts.
The Lyra stays.
And then gain 3, so he gains 8 total. So he can go up to 34.
The problem is it's not stopping the Lyra chain. He needed to interrupt the Lyra this turn. And OmegaZero, being as patient as he was with his resources, said to himself, you know what, this Lyra is going to pull the value I need. I have time to simply clear the board. So his pan out of not pushing damage and instead playing for late game, this is the situation that he had in mind ages ago when he traded in the Cabal Songstealer. He said, if I just simply buy time, I'll be totally safe.
Yeah. He goes with the 3 attack to clear off the Radiant Elemental. I think most of the time this actually blocks more damage. Because say OmegaZero had an extra spell that he could couple with the Velen's Chosen.
Well, that doesn't matter anymore, because this is a ton of damage.
And picks up Forbidden Shaping. I think that allows him to piece together enough damage for lethal. He was a little bit off, but just needed that spell from Lyra, and that's the power of Lyra sticking onto the board. The Forbidden Shaping will allow OmegaZero to go up to a 1-0 lead.
What an outstanding game from OmegaZero. Very fortunate find off the Curious Glimmer route, but that could have very easily punished him as well. Just not being able to get to a turn where you're able to play Ultimate Infestation. He timed the Dirty Rat with the Doomsayer to make sure that he got back initiative, and from there, he kept the board under control and found a turn to chain Lyra together.
And that's a big win for OmegaZero. He talked about how he was unfavored in this matchup. So picking up a win in a matchup that's not an aggressive deck is huge. We're going to get into game number 2 right after this.
Don't stray too far away from the fire, my friends. There's more tales to tell. This is the 2017 Hearthstone Summer Championship.
Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the HCT Summer Championship. You're looking at Orange and OmegaZero prepping for their game number 2 in this second series of the day. It's definitely a big one for both of these players. And I think it's an even bigger one for OmegaZero, a player who was at the World Championship last year and at the Winter Championship earlier on this year. He talked a lot about how in the Winter Championship he wasn't feeling it and he had a pretty poor performance. But let's go and hear from his own words what makes this championship different.
In the Bahamas, I was sick and wasn't feeling very well.
This is a rough situation to be in.
But I tried to fight through it and play my best.
All those turns that OmegaZero missed gave Samuel South so much time.
Then the first round went really long, and in the second match, I made a lot of mistakes. It affected my performance.
2 hours and 40 minutes was that match, and it was all for nothing for OmegaZero.
When I lost the tournament, I felt terrible.
OmegaZero, one of the favorites from China, has been eliminated.
Now, I'm feeling a lot better than I did in the Bahamas. So far, no Chinese player has qualified for the World Championships. It's disappointing, but I think I will be the one to represent my country. I feel like I have prepared more for this tournament than any other player, and I think I can beat any player here.
Definitely a storied career for OmegaZero, who is often touted as the best, if not one of the best players to come from that region. Jason Joe also in that conversation a lot of times. It's kind of ironic that both those players have very different playstyles.
And take a look at the bottom there, where OmegaZero says that he feels that those aggressive styles give him more control over a game. I mean, that I agree with him, but it just feels weird to read it.
I play aggressive decks because I like control.
Yeah, same.
It's basically what he said. And when we had
Control the face.
Control the face.
Yeah.
Control the damage. We talked to OmegaZero earlier this week, and one of the first questions I asked him was, how are you feeling? And I expected him to, give an answer that was like, I'm, feeling better, a little jet lagged, whatever. He just looked at us and was like, good. That was it. Yeah. he's a man of few words. If you ever get a chance to speak with him, but definitely a player that's a lot of players fear.
Yeah. Now, Orange is not a man of few words.
Oh no.
And when we asked him about OmegaZero, I thought it was really interesting because he said he felt that he shared a lot of similarities with OmegaZero. And right after that interview, OmegaZero sits down. We go, Orange said that he feels like you're the Chinese Orange. He goes, not at all. I don't think I'm anything like Orange.
So we have completely different play styles. They disagree on what decks they bring, and they even disagree on how alike they are to each other from different regions. I think one of the things they share is their practice regimen. I think they both work incredibly hard. They both prepare a lot for tournaments. They don't just rely on raw skill. They really, dive deep into the meta and try and come up with the solutions. But getting into this matchup, it's gonna be Rogue from OmegaZero versus the Shaman from Orange. Now, Rogue does not really have too many bad matchups at the moment, but I feel like Shaman is one of the decks that can fight against it the best, especially with some of the techs that Orange has. He has a Sea Giant in his deck.
Yeah, and the Sea Giant is, of course, one of the best cards that operates versus decks that go wide on board. A lot of times this matchup is a trade fest in the early turns until one player takes that sizable advantage. There's two significant benefits Orange has to that. Number one, his deck trades a little bit better. Number two is he's got Doppelgangster Evolve. The problem he struggles with is when he doesn't have Jade Claws, when he's not able to utilize Flame Tongue Totem, when Jade Lightning doesn't line up very well. And right now his hand is kind of clunky. Drawing Aya plus the Doppelgangster plus the Evolve is going to mean he has to spend a lot of time playing defense until he hits one of those turns.
And that's one of the things that Shaman does really well with, is fighting for the early board. It's one of the reasons why it's sort of an aggressive deck killer, because it has so many tools like Maelstrom Portal, Jade Claws, one-drops, Flame Tongue Totem to fight for early boards. And then it has the ability to reload with very little resources. It can make a giant board with just Doppelgangster Evolve, and that's how you need to fight against Rogue. But OmegaZero picks up a pretty good card with Prince Keleseth.
Well, this could trap him a little bit in some situations here. The Spell Power Totem is one of the scariest ones that's there. This amplifies Maelstrom Portal, and amplifies the Jade Lightning. I think OmegaZero is very wise here to take this slow and go, you know what, I don't need this Prince Keleseth buff right now. This is going to be a long game. I need to keep Orange under control, or I'm going to lose the board.
Yeah. And daggering up also gives him the flexibility of not having to spend that mana in later turns to not only get the damage in to try and clear things off more efficiently, but also to activate South Sea Deckhand. So I definitely like that. You pointed out could be a trap, and I think that's what it was. I like this play significantly better.
Way more. And this speaks to the level of preparation that OmegaZero takes for these events. Understanding this matchup in particular is so much about just keeping Orange off of a board.
Yeah. Now, I want to sort of give a history of OmegaZero as a deck builder. It feels like Rogue is right up his alley because he is not only an aggressive player, but also sort of a tempo player. OmegaZero was one of the original fathers of the Tempo Mage deck and Seeker Mage decks. It was played in China as sort of a mainstream tier 1 deck long before it made its way into the West in Europe and the Americas. So I feel like Rogue is a deck that OmegaZero should be incredibly comfortable with, given his history as a player and as a deck builder.
Yeah. We haven't even touched on this Primal Fin Totem, by the way.
Nope. It's doing work.
The thing about it is Shaman cards happen to line up very well versus Shaman cards. And so Orange has contained this Primal Fin Totem fairly well thus far. And this is really the key turn right now for OmegaZero. Orange does not have a way to fight off this board. And that's where Cobalt Scalebane starts paying dividends, is immediately when you're able to seize the board. It's been included in a lot of these aggressive matchups to not only fight control, but to be that big payoff once you have the board. But Orange has a lot of tools to fight against that. As you can see, some of the major elements on the right side of your screen that he's trying to hit, those are his big payoff effects. But those are being contained right now.
Those are also sort of unique to Orange. He's actually cut a copy of Bloodlust in order to make his board and his evolve effects more consistent. Barnes has played in the deck sort of to be another activator for evolve. It's kind of a similar slot to Serenite Chain Gang, which is usually a one-of in a lot of these Evolve Shaman decks. That's sort of what he's replaced it with. And that Sea Giant is basically the replacement for the second Bloodlust. So definitely trying to play more for a board and have more consistent Evolve results, as opposed to trying to get an early board and then Bloodlust it down with the consistency of that draw.
Yeah, and OmegaZero paying heed to that board presence earlier on is now suddenly a very big deal. Orange is going to need to get a major benefit from this Doppelgangster Evolve.
Yep.
You get an average of 30 power and health combined from that combination.
But this board might even be able to clear up anything that comes out of Doppelgangster Evolve, especially with the support cards that he has in his hand. Zero may be able to pick up something that can affect combat.
I'm thinking the Death Rattle effects or Dark Arakoa. Those are the two that really come to mind for me of what Orange is going to need.
Needs to be big, though.
Job's done.
Zero shaking his head. Well, exactly 30 of stats.
Nubian Unraveler is interesting, but it doesn't really have much of effect on this deck from OmegaZero. Of course, it makes spells cost 2 more, but Tempo Rogue is very spell light. It's got Backstabs, Shadow Step, and Cold Blood. That's effectively it. It doesn't have any other spells as you move your way up the curve, except for the potions from Zero. But it's more about playing minions and utilizing these tempo minions to be able to gain a board advantage rather than utilize spells to try and remove your opponent's board.
The important thing is that just Orange got so much on board. And OmegaZero, he oftentimes just has to respect this. And I like his trade here of keeping the Cobalt Scalebane around so that he gets that extra effect. But Orange drew second Maelstrom Portal. I'm curious if that's enough to swing this back because he's also got patches in hand.
Yeah, this one's tough because he's got a 1 in 4 to hit the Maelstrom Portal, which if he does hit, it's probably the best outcome for this current hand.
On the spell power totem, of course.
On the spell
what you're
power
referring
totem.
to, yeah.
But he can have a more consistent clear with just Maelstrom Portal plus patches and leave up the 2/2.
I like getting the mana tide out personally.
And having the mana tide out is definitely a benefit, especially since the board will be mostly clear. He'll have to expend a hit from Prince Keleseth and the dagger hit in order to take down mana tide.
But he keeps a 5/5.
He does keep a 5/5.
Wise of Orange to sequence this way as well. There is 1-cost minions that can punish your ability to actually play further minions. A 1-mana 2/3 that increases the cost of them by 2.
Emerald Hive Queen, that is correct. Those small things, you'll hear Orange use a term called ABC Hearthstone, the fundamentals of the game, and that means like sequencing, order of operations, things like that. And that's something that Orange takes pride in doing well because of how much he preps.
Well, OmegaZero got that early Jade Lightning from Orange in a fairly weak position. It wasn't really much to capitalize on with it. And now that he's stuck a Vile Spine in the board, it means that Bone Mare is a big payoff here. There's actually no way for Orange to completely clear this unless he got a Flame Tongue Totem from Barnes.
It would have to be the second Flame Tongue Totem, only 1 copy left in his deck with the draw. And then his board would be pretty strong. He'd have the 2 Flame Tongue Totems sort of backing each other up. But I think he's going to go with the much more consistent play here, which is Eye of Blackfall. But OmegaZero has gas.
And backstab. Now, I am curious if that backstab actually alters his game plan in this spot. And I like this play from OmegaZero. He's able to clear up the board heavily, and the Tar Creeper still challenges the Aya in this spot. And this pays a lot of heat to devolve from Orange in this spot.
Yeah, if he plays Bone Mare on this board, and if he trades into Aya, he wastes a lot of damage, and he just sort of, lets it contest right away.
Ah, I like this. That extra damage that he's expending right now, he's turning his life total into a resource. He's like, yeah, this 5 damage isn't going to matter. Orange won't win without having the board. And so expend that 5 life. Don't worry about it. He's got plenty to play with here. Rely on the 2 Bone Mares to put so much pressure on Orange that he can simply exhaust his resources.
Yeah, and he's sort of relying here on having something stick to the board, but with a stealth Shaku, outside of a devolve plus something else to clear the last minion, he's going to stick a minion next turn for one of these.
Very tall order.
Barnes up. I guess Flamethrower Totem would be the best. He doesn't have an evolve effect in hand, so not really anything else. Pulls Sting from below, which would have been a pretty good evolve target, but isn't able to get it. And the positioning is pretty awkward here.
Yeah, the positioning I think is actually pretty far off in this spot. Now, granted, Flametongue Totem is probably just the first one to die anyway, after the thing from below does. So I think his main goal was just simply to get thing from below next to a Flametongue Totem afterwards.
Yeah, well, I think in his mind,
it's also better for the Flametongue Totem. That's why he did it. Okay.
Like, Flametongue Totem, is, like you said, is probably going to die second anyway, regardless of what he pulls, or even first if he doesn't pull a taunt. He did that specifically to try and go for the second Flametongue Totem. On the off chance that he did, he could have had a much easier board clear. So I think the positioning on average is not that great, but in the situation where you're kind of going, all in for a board clear, at this stage when he's behind on board, he kind of needs to go for those type of plays where he takes a risk.
And this is the turn where you've now seen OmegaZero's use of his life total really pay off. He gets to do it again, and in 16 is more than comfortable here, and he is shredding the remains that Orange has.
Yeah, and trading here is really just a nod to devolve. If he goes face here, yeah, it's 8 damage to the face, but devolve becomes a big problem in that case.
And I think with that final draw from Orange, OmegaZero has completely won the battle. It's a matter of time until this damage gets delivered. This would have to be the most unbelievable evolve I've ever seen.
And even then,
yeah, I think if you just picked all the best minions in all of their slots, that Orange probably still doesn't get there. He's just been contained too hard.
You get a 3 and 2 twos. That's basically nothing.
Yeah, it's not enough.
Job's done.
It's even a pretty good evolve, but he's fallen so far behind at this point. And devolve, it works if Orange is able to trade afterwards.
Yeah.
But I imagine once again his board's going to get shredded.
Yeah.
And then with 2 Bone Mares out, OmegaZero's still left with 2 6-cost minions in the face of devolve.
OmegaZero is very close. I believe he can push 20 damage through this turn. Bone Mare, the attacks on board, plus 8 damage from hand with Cold Blood plus Bone Mare on one of the other minions.
But trading off the board is effectively the 2-turn lethal as well.
Yeah. I think he was trying to think of first how that actually would have been lethal damage had he gone face. But it was a big risk. There's not many cards in the Shaman pool that would have allowed him to do that.
Yeah, it's really Lightning Bolt, Rock Fighter.
Yeah, that was pretty much
Flametongue Totem. I think those are the only ones.
Yeah, out of quite a large pool of class cards from Shaman. So I definitely like the safe play from OmegaZero there, not trying to make a risky, flashy play to go for lethal. But to sit back, clear off the board, there is no way he loses from this point. Almost no way.
The only way that was happening was if devolve turned that Shaku into a Doomsayer. Didn't happen. OmegaZero now with a 2-0 lead over Orange. He has maintained a slow pace, slow and steady throughout the match thus far. And in the late game scenarios, he's been the one with the big edge.
And these are big games. We talked about earlier on, and they both mentioned that Orange should be favored across these lineups. But OmegaZero is finding the reasonable matchups. He's finding the matchups that are very close on paper to around 50-50, 55-45, and coming out on top of those matchups with solid play. And that's what he needs to do when he's going up against a lineup that theoretically counters his. His last deck is going to be the Aggro Druid. He's the only player in the field to bring Aggro Druid.
Yeah, in his other deck, you saw that Orange banned away Hunter from OmegaZero. OmegaZero's Hunter deck is basically made to put so much pressure on two of Orange's decks that I think that this is kind of what he anticipated. I think he thought that the bans would pan out exactly as they have thus far, and that as a result, the Hunter deck would just not be something he's able to adequately defeat. So in this spot now with Aggro Druid, this really boils down to so much about how OmegaZero opens. If he's not getting super powerful starts, I think Orange has some breathing room in these matchups, but when he's got 3 tries with Aggro Druid, you are going to see some good starts eventually.
Yeah, I was looking at the decks before the match and trying to come up with what deck that Orange would ban, and I actually settled on Aggro Druid because Aggro Druid has 2 pretty favorable matchups against the lineup, plus 1 okay one, whereas Hunter only had like 3 reasonable matchups across the board. So Orange is trying to go for the consistency of his lineup rather than try and go for the specific matchups. But we're going to get into that game in just a moment. But we do want to give you guys a preview of what's to come. There you can see Baizu backstage waiting for her match against the current world champion Pavel. Her first time on a big HCT stage like this, and she has to go against Pavel. That's going to be a tough task.
Yeah, I mean, this is going to be so good to see. And the World Championships coming up here in Amsterdam, January 18th through the 21st in the Netherlands. The first stop in Europe for the Hearthstone Championship Tour.
It's going to be fantastic. I can't wait for that. And there's a player who's looking pretty happy. Purple, after his win early on, hanging out with Ant, Brian Kibler. That's Stephen Chang from Team 5, from the Hearthstone team as well. Hanging out and watching some of these matches. So Ant's going to be at the World Championship in Amsterdam. So I could see him, he's fist pumping later when he saw that it was going to be in Europe. He's excited to go there.
Yeah, and there you can see him one of the qualifiers. But I think the big story for the year is how dominant Europe has been when it comes to these championships. 3 competitors in spring were from Europe, and notice that Chinese region is missing from qualifiers thus far. They are looking to change that this weekend.
Yeah, and America's not doing too bad for themselves with Frozen, Doc Pone, and Ant as representatives from the Americas region, and it's looking pretty good for them. Now, Guidon had a rough match in the first match of the day, but then Purple was able to take the match in the last one that we saw. So we're definitely going to be keeping track of the regions as we move forward. But let's jump back into this one. OmegaZero, a 2-0 lead over Orange. Aggro Druid, the only player to bring it. That's his last deck.
Yeah, and this is, I think, one of the more dangerous starts for Orange in this one. Jade Blossom, obviously a very critical card to the Jade Druid deck. It both ramps up your mana and your Jades at the same time. But OmegaZero, he has Mark of the Lotus in hand. He's got a 1-cost minion that it doesn't die to the hero power on turn 2. He can follow that up with Bloodsail Corsair, find the patches in Mark of the Lotus. And with Savage Roar, you're looking at a lot of damage potential here. But did that Doomsayer potentially disrupt this?
That's what Orange was looking for. There is a copy of Crazed Alchemist in OmegaZero's list, and double Doomsayer.
This is going to give Orange all the time that he needs to get out of this scenario. Spreading Plague moving to 6 mana put a big hit in Druid's defensive capability. That was really where the weakness of this deck lied, and the increase of those costs really changed everything. OmegaZero draws patches now, and this means Orange is going to move safely into this Spreading Plague, and that is a disastrous scenario for OmegaZero.
Yeah, this is going to be pretty rough for OmegaZero. He's got I would say not a unique Aggro Druid lineup, but it's definitely got some tech cards. Crazed Alchemist is definitely a nod to Doomsayer. We heard earlier OmegaZero was expecting more Quest Mage and more heavy control decks like that coming into this to counter Priest and Druid. So there's no surprise that Crazed Alchemist is in his list. But he also goes down with Cobalt's Scalebane, which is a card that's been making its way into many Aggro Druid lineups to try and have a little bit more oomph in the mid game. and he has forewent the Bittertide Hydras to put these cards in, so a little bit different than maybe some Anglo Druid lists that you've seen in the past.
Yeah, I think South Sea Captain and Cobalt Scalebane fight the aggressive matchups just that little bit more. If he's able to get some fairly insignificant pirate pressure, the Captain can turn that on. And the Cobalt Scalebane doesn't get punished by a wide board position with just a ton of small minions. So I actually like the call in this deck for OmegaZero.
Yeah, and this is going to be pretty rough. OmegaZero, I think he would have been in a not too bad position if Patches was not drawn last turn, because he could have built a much more powerful board going into this one with potentially a South Sea Captain and a trade over with Patches.
Oh my.
But it is not looking good for him because Orange has all the ramp in the world, plus Spreading Plague, plus Ultimate Infestation, and was able to stifle the early game with Doomsayers. This is the dream for Jade Druid in this matchup.
Now, the one thing I'm looking at is Orange is still a little ways off of actually getting to that 10 mana turn. And so OmegaZero has
just a little ways off. Let's be clear.
It's just a little ways off. Losing Innervate definitely changes when that card comes down. OmegaZero, I mean, this is the one opening he had to really build a board. He has to take it here. And the board right now, honestly, it's strong enough to fight Spreading Plague. This is one of the reasons that Captain's found in this deck. Strengthen the minions you have so that cards like Spreading Plague are not as big of an impact.
But Spreading Plague Doomsayer is the question. Can he get through that?
He's got Crazed Alchemist that he just drew.
He's got Crazed Alchemist, yep.
Orange.
So the answer is yes. Orange is going to feel like Doomsayer is going to land.
Oh, absolutely. Your first one went off. You have the 15 extra health at the very least here. This is the play for Orange. But now this is where that tech choice really adds up for OmegaZero. Savage Roar helps him chew through this damage. He may not go that direction because he's got a minion to add to that now.
I don't know.
It's looking like a mighty good Savage Roar to me, though.
Does clear the board. You're developing a 2-2. You're still going to have a 4-3, a 3-2, and a 3-1 on board alongside those.
Yeah, the big impact cards on Orange's side at this point, you're looking at Malfury on the Pestilent and Primordial Drake. Those are the two things that OmegaZero has to think about the most this turn. But yeah, I don't think he's got a way to play around him. I think he's got to go.
Yep, and there's the Savage Roar. So now the onus is on Orange to find a way to get back. He's still got to buy himself a turn before Ultimate Infestation is able to come out. And he needs a pretty big card. Fangel is
pretty reasonable.
It fights for the board.
Yeah, so the thing here is Orange is just going to take a heap of damage next turn. But getting the extra body from the Mire Keeper, having the Ultimate Infestation lined up right into the Cobalt Scalebane, those are big benefits for Orange right now, because in a situation where that's normally Bittertide Hydra, OmegaZero could choose to protect that. He doesn't really have that option going forward. Orange, of course, though, he's thinking about, what about second Savage Roar? Do I have a way to even fight against that? He's counting if he hero powers down this 3-1 Bloodsail Corsair, would that give him enough time against a Savage Roar? The little things here, we've heard Orange talk about it, the ABC Hearthstone play from Pavel, always on point. That's what's going through his head.
You also don't want to overthink things. You don't want to try and make fancy plays. And Orange says he tries to shy away from that by practicing a lot. If you get to the point where you have those repetitions, you're constantly, practicing and, getting those reps with these different decks, you sort of get to this point where you're on autopilot. Like you've seen all these situations before, and so you can make it happen. But now, Orange may have turned the corner. He's still healthy. OmegaZero trading off his board, and Ultimate Infestation will take out this Cobalt Scalebane and draw Orange 5 more cards, refill his hand, gain life, summon a 5/5.
Honestly, I think Orange taking so much time on that turn led OmegaZero to believe that the likelihood of Ultimate Infestation was so much lower that he chose to invest into his board state rather than his damage potential. And now Orange is pulling the game back. He's at a healthy life total. He's got way more cards. And OmegaZero's deck is now filled with low-cost minions. Push number 2. And this is basically it.
Is that enough? I don't think it is.
I'm looking at a Jade Behemoth. I'm looking at a Swipe. Looking at a lot of large green men coming up.
OmegaZero needs living mana into Savage Roar into something else.
Wow.
I mean, at this point, he's got enough health and enough cards to where that ultimate infestation may not even have to be used.
Oh, I disagree with that. It doesn't have to be used, but he's going to use it. This is expend as many cards as you can, and you don't care how many cards you've overdrawn at this point.
Next
Kill the
turn,
board.
just wipe his face, wrap your minion for 1, just to get the cards out of your hand so you can get more wraths
That
and more
ultimate,
swipe.
that ultimate infestation is going to rip out of Orange's hand so fast. This game's donezo. Orange has contained OmegaZero in game number 3.
The light protects me.
The lightning 75-second turn for ultimate infestation is... You said living mana, right?
Living mana won't do it.
It has now been countered. Wow, Orange is going to just spend all his stuff. He's like, eh, why overdraw?
Yeah.
Swipe is basically the same thing. But I think many analysts would agree this is better.
OmegaZero not tapping out just yet. He's still got hope that living mana might be able to push through enough damage. He doesn't know that the spreading plague is in the hand. But man, Orange has taken a giant board lead in a matchup where board lead is the most important. Galaka Crawler not going to do much. OmegaZero, I don't know how much longer he wants to stay in this one, and concedes. Orange takes game number 3 one step closer to tying it up. We've seen a reverse sweep today. Is another one possible?
Well, I do have to say OmegaZero did run into the draw patches scenario, which is very punishing to a lot of the aggressive decks out there. Had he not drawn that patches, I'm curious how different that game is.
Yeah, and Orange has had a pretty storied career. He's won a few tournaments. People know him as one of these staple Hearthstone pros, but HCT is a tournament that has eluded him. And we got a chance to speak to him about what this championship appearance means to him.
The goal has always been to claim that title as one of the greatest of all time. I've been around for a long time. I've won most big tournament series that are going around, but this is my first HCT Championship.
Look at that face. He is going to the Summer Championship.
Wow. I want to make it to the World Championship and claim that title. It's the last piece I need to fulfill my legacy within Hearthstone. Leading up to this tournament, I've been playing Hearthstone for about 10 to 12 hours a day. If I lose, then there's any doubt that I haven't done everything I could. I don't think I could ever really forgive myself. It really is like the most important tournament I've ever played. I've taken a very long road to get here, been doing a lot of stuff along the way, but it's certainly time to get that last final piece.
The final piece, he calls it, and that's exactly what it is for him. I mean, you can see just what he's done so far as a competitive Hearthstone player. He's won a tournament earlier this year with the DreamHack Summer. So definitely something that's important to him. But we asked him in our interview with him early on this week, you know, does this tournament mean more than the other ones? And he said, oh, definitely yes. He said, being at a world championship, being on a stage like this is different than any other. So he's going to be playing his heart out.
Orange is one of the most passionate players that I think I've ever met. His performance means so much to him. And even if he's played an event exceptionally, his finish still affects the way he feels about it. Everything he wants to be absolutely perfect. And that's a difficult thing to do. That's a long road that you have to take to get to that point. And this matchup right here, this could get somewhat tough. OmegaZero has a very strong opening hand, and this is a matchup where tech cards really matter. OmegaZero's drawn one of his Galaka Crawlers, and Orange is likely to rely on the power of South Sea Captain to really fight for board this game. Yeah, and he handled the swing from that Galaka Crawler.
This matchup, both these decks live and die by the board, and they pack very little spells. They're both sort of decks that, you know, need to get early board tempo in order to find wins. And, you know, it's very close. It's a very even matchup. Rogue does have tools like Backstab. They have ways to buff patches that Druids don't with Prince Keleseth and with, yeah, basically Prince Keleseth. I was thinking, like, Shadow Step does it too, but, oh, yeah, that's still Prince Keleseth.
Yeah.
So
I think this is very wise of Orange to backstab early here as well. I think one of the big problems he runs into is if OmegaZero is taking the game slow and has that Galaka Crawler. So in this spot, Orange is going to try to force OmegaZero to fight for the board as hard as he can and hope that that's enough to offset a potential swing from a card like that.
Orange is drawn pretty heavy, and that's not what you can afford. If you miss one turn, for either of these players, if they miss one turn, that is huge.
Well, I think Orange is doing a good job at fighting for this, though. The timing of the captain really lines up well here, because if Galaka Crawler is going to come down, OmegaZero can't couple it with a hero power. So that Firefly and that Patches stay on the board for this turn and continue to provide that fighting presence. Now, OmegaZero has Bloodsail Corsair to swing that right back. And this is what I meant by this matchup is very volatile and very much about the tech cards. Whoever gets that first initial lead is really the big advantage. And right now, Orange needs something to handle this 3-4.
Yeah, just a 3-mana 3-3 may not be enough for him to try and get back onto the board. And Shadow Step really doesn't...
Dead card.
It is a dead card. Now, basically, Bone Mare is the only card in his hand that benefits from Shadow Step. And even then, it comes turn 7, you have to have a minion on the board, and then you bring it back, and it still costs 5 mana.
And this issue is likely to compound at this point. With OmegaZero having the trade lined up, Orange is anticipating simply using his hero power and clearing off the Galaka Crawler on the following turn. But OmegaZero has Power of the Wild. I'm curious if he makes a 3-2 or decides to buff his minions and keep the important bigger minion in play. And I like the buff.
Yeah, dodging the dagger, I think, is the big thing
And
here.
a second backstab.
And a second backstab as well. This is quite important. OmegaZero's next turn is basically slated for Cobalt Scalebane, unless maybe Living Mana
Side
changes
7
things.
agent. Oh my gosh. Orange's hand. There's no synergy here.
This is that missed turn that I was talking about. This is going to put him so far behind. He develops a 1-2 and a dagger. And OmegaZero develops a 5-5.
You look at Orange's tech slots here. He's got 2 Bittertide Hydra, Leroy Jenkins, Cairn, and Bone Mare. Those are his major tech slots. But if you look at the stuff that fights for board really well right now, he's got Prince Balinar, he's got 2 Tar Creepers, he's got Shadow Blade, he's got SI7 agents.
South Sea deckhands as well.
Anything to fight back here, and he's drawn so much of his top end by turn 4.
You know, pretty much everybody knows what Rogue can do. We've seen it so far this tournament, you know, with Booyah, with the Prince Keleseth, but the deck does struggle because it lacks card draw. It lacks removal spells. If it doesn't draw those cards in the right order to be able to tempo out the board, it can look weak at times. It does pack a ton of potential damage from hand, which is one of the things that I think can make up for that at times. But this is when it looks ugly.
Yikes.
Dagger pass.
Cobalt Scalebane attack you pass.
Yeah, that is a big green light.
That's the fastest turn we've seen from either of these two players, too. OmegaZero knows that he's closing the door.
Yeah, and this OmegaZero, just looking at his demeanor, looks really different from Bahamas. In Bahamas, he was slouched over. He had his hands in his face. He looked like he was about to fall asleep most of the time. Now, he looks pretty composed. In the last 2 games, he's looked like he was 100% focused, and I think that's what he needs to be. It looks like he's feeling better and playing better than when he was at the Winter Championship and had that disappointing performance.
And I think in Orange's mind here that he's looking at Leroy for defense. And that is not a good idea, but it's the best idea he's got.
That's still giving OmegaZero fodder for Savage Roar.
19 damage available for OmegaZero this turn. And Orange's deck, outside of Prince Balinar and Tar Creeper, has
going for it every
basically
time.
no way to protect himself.
Yeah.
Honestly, I think Fireblight, Cobalt Scalebane does the job. I think that OmegaZero has multiple roads to El Dorado at this point.
Yeah, I guess, you know, both plays win in the game. Putting your opponent to 1 is pretty big. I don't know what he's worried about. Maybe Tar Creeper plus something that clears off some of his board. If he had Tar Creeper plus exactly SI, he may have been able to clear up enough to where he can't push through that 1 damage. But it looks like Savage Roar will end the game next turn.
OmegaZero and his aggressive decks have kept Orange on the back foot for a long time. Orange knows it, and OmegaZero is going to take his first match 3-1 over Orange.
That's a big win for OmegaZero. You know, I can't call any of these players underdogs because they both are are titans in their regions. But when it comes to decks, I think we can call him an underdog when it comes to the decks department. But he was able to overcome, take wins in key matchups. And he's moving on to the winner's match where he'll face Surrender. So still a tough match for him to go, and Orange will fall down to face EA Tiers in the elimination match.
Yeah, another player from the Americas. He's dropped down lower bracket. Orange still fighting for his life here. This is a double elimination groups. But Raven's on stage with an interview with OmegaZero.
Thanks a lot. I'm here with OmegaZero. First off, congratulations on the win. How were you feeling going into this match against Orange? Were you feeling confident with your lineup?
首先恭喜你获胜啊！然后在跟那个 Orange 比赛的时候，你对自己有自信吗？觉得是会打赢吗？
我挺有自信的，就在双方帮选之后，我觉得我的卡组就是已经占了优势，所以我觉得，我对打败他蛮有自信的。
I'm pretty confident about this match, especially after knowing the abandoned picks. So I'm pretty sure that I'm going to win this game. So it's boding well for me.
Okay, it definitely is so far. And you want the only player who's bringing Aggro Druid as opposed to Jade Druid. Do you think that's going to be the deck that wins you this whole tournament?
因为你是唯一一个带来快攻德的选手嘛，你觉得这个卡组是不是你取胜那个比较关键的一个地方？
我觉得算是吧。我觉得这套卡组是非常强的一套卡组，就是我带上这套卡组的话，会给我减轻一些壓力。
Aggro Druid is definitely one of the key component of me winning this matchups, and he thinks that it's a very strong deck, and it has been serving me well so far.
Okay, definitely has. And finally, you said you weren't feeling well in the Bahamas, and that's why you didn't play to your best. Do you feel like you're playing your best right now?
在巴哈马的时候，因为是身体不好嘛，打的不是可能是最佳状态。你觉得现在是状态是已经达到100%了吗？
我觉得我现在状态非常好。 虽然可能还没有达到100%，但是我觉得已经接近了。
I'm definitely in good state. I can't say that I'm 100%, but I think it's close there.
Oh, well, okay. Well, congratulations again. It was a huge victory, a great first match. So we'll see you when you play your next one a little bit later on. That's going to be it from us. Let's check back in with TJ and Admirable to wrap up the match.
Thanks very much. Pretty cool to hear how much faith he has in the Aggro Druid, the only player to bring it in the entire field. And even when we were talking to him earlier this week, he says he thinks it's his strongest deck and one of the strongest decks in the game at the moment.
He's always been an innovator when it comes to aggressive lineups and aggressive decks in general. We saw him pioneer Tempo Mage in metagames where players thought it was completely out of contention. And here, bringing both Hunter and Aggro Druid, picking up his first matchup, I think this speaks to the full form that we expect from OmegaZero when he comes to these championships.
Yeah, and being the only player to bring an aggressive lineup, OmegaZero takes the win over Orange, who many players had touted as the favorite to win this. We're going to have more HCT Summer action right after this.
Coming up, the defending world champion, Pavel, versus the first ever